Welcome to our channel, Gray Matters. We are two neurodivergent ladies who fixate and needed a place to share. We created this channel just for that. For a deeper dive, please check out our podcast, Fixate Today, Gone Tomorrow. Today, we will be discussing the Mica Francis Miller tragedy. Our focus in this case is primarily about the circumstances in which Mica was living at the time she lost her life. It is widely accepted that JP was incredibly abusive to Mica, took advantage of his position as the church leader for personal and financial reasons, and was using the nonprofit status of the church to avoid paying taxes. Could JP's greed have led to involvement in criminal activities that went far beyond this? Had he got in way over his head and became part of a large-scale organized crime ring? We believe the focus on the loss of Mica's life has been overshadowing a much larger criminal network that JP may have been involved with. Mica could no longer take the abuse and wanted nothing to do with the horrific crimes being committed around her. She wanted out of the whole situation, but knew too much, and understood that getting away from this life would be extremely dangerous due to the things she had witnessed. Maybe a member of a federal agency investigating a major organized crime ring approached her to become an informant and collect evidence. We believe that there are two layers to what we have been seeing unfold in this case. The loss of Mica's life and JP's inappropriate way of announcing it to his congregation caught the attention of the world in a way nobody anticipated. Mica was compiling evidence about the criminal activities of JP and others in their circle, possibly as leverage to get away from it all and to expose the evil that was happening. We think Mica was not only a victim, but also a hero who may have saved countless others at the expense of her life. If we are correct, she was extremely brave and selfless, and as such, will be celebrated as one someday. Her bravery, along with extensive federal investigations, will hopefully lead to many bad people being arrested for their unspeakable deeds and many victims being freed. The rapid involvement of the FBI was the biggest indicator that something much bigger was going on. But other pieces started to be revealed, such as JP's comments about Mica's use of the term, quote, double agent, the discovery that JP was a partial owner in a bar called Crocodile Rocks, the revelation that he often brought bags of cash home or to his church from the bar, and the use of the canine unit when police searched church, which are typically used to expose drugs or cash. The puzzle pieces have come together and led us to our belief that this is a much larger case than the public has been led to believe. It seems like money laundering may have been the most likely reason which would explain these suspicious happenings. However, since the FBI was involved, it suggested that money laundering went way beyond the scope of just the fraud happening at the church. It opened up the possibilities that JP had entered a much higher crime organization. So what is money laundering? The short answer is it's the concealment of the origins of illegally obtained money, typically by means of transfers involving foreign banks and legitimate businesses. Actually, the term money laundering originated from gangsters in the 1920s and 1930s who used legitimate businesses to hide the proceeds of their illegal activities. These gangsters often owned cash-only businesses, such as laundromats and restaurants, and would mix their illegal earnings with the legitimate business income. The cash-heavy nature of these businesses made it difficult to track the sources of the money. Crocodile Rocks is largely a cash-only business, and often churches are also. Who introduced JP to these opportunities? Well, we have a pretty good guess that we will get to a bit later. So how did JP become the despicable man he is? I would say his father, upbringing, and the lack of education beyond the scope of the church. However, JP has been blessed with charm and an uncanny ability to memorize and quote the Bible, which he uses to manipulate people of faith who are seeking a greater purpose and meaning of life. He is also a talented musician, which doesn't hurt. At this point, he was just an evil man who used his authority to abuse his wife and fleece his congregation of believers. He had grown up in this area and built lifelong friendships as well as trust and admiration of others that can only be achieved through generations. He is a bad guy who figured out how to work the system and used control to abuse his wife and keep her quiet about his dealings. Then along came COVID. Many segments of the economy suffered during 2020 and 2021, including churches. Regulations, which were meant to minimize people congregating, especially indoors, impacted many churches financially. Restaurants and bars were obviously also impacted by COVID regulations. Craig Smith, a fellow co-owner of Crocodile Rocks, even spoke out to the media about the need for lifting some of the regulations that had been put in place for people's safety. Could it be that both entities needed supplementary income at this time to make the money they needed to support their lifestyles? We know that outward appearances of wealth, success, and power were extremely important to JP. More importantly, JP had to maintain his dominance in his marriage and not admit weakness. Desperate times led to desperate measures. One thing JP had was respect in the community and trusting relationships that he had built with friends over his lifetime. In future videos, we can address his friends and business associates who may have also been involved. We noticed in 2021, it seemed like mayhem surrounding JP's life significantly increased. We started hearing more about his mistreatment and abuse of Mica, as well as increased discussions from JP about her so-called mental illness, including involuntary hospitalizations to mental health centers, which were initiated by JP. We learn about Mica being isolated from friends and family, JP's obsession with forcing medication on her, and JP's sermons becoming more unhinged and seemingly targeted at his wife. JP's so-called intimate relationship with Susie Skinner begins, and the suspicious death of her husband, Chris Skinner, are also key moments in 2021. During all this, JP becomes more involved at Crocodile Rocks and inexplicably becomes a partial owner. We hear more about buying, selling, transferring of lands, homes, and businesses by JP and several of the people around him, and see the accumulation of a large number of vehicles in the church's name. Throughout the year 2021, signs of JP's paranoia become more and more evident. It is critical that all of this is happening in South Carolina, which is considered one of the most criminal-friendly states in the country due to legal loopholes and law enforcement corruption, which we will explore more in future video. A report showed in 1 year, more than 3,000 businesses operating in Horry and Georgetown counties, who in total wired $700 million to a host of unsavory organizations, including Mexican and Colombian drug cartels and Middle Eastern terrorist organizations. Myrtle Beach is the center of much of this activity. So what if JP had been lured or at least introduced to this facet of organized crime around 2021, when money could be tight from the COVID restrictions? Could he have been in way over his head, and might his other transgressions and ignorance not only exposed himself, but also his colleagues? This case has garnered headlines throughout the country and gathered web sleuths, as JP calls them, from across the world to scour through the evidence in an effort to make sense of this case. We think it is probable that in addition to JP's abuse, stalking, stealing from the church, and many other criminal behaviors, he may have been cocky enough to move on to the big boys table. His behaviors and carelessness could possibly have implicated dozens of friends and co-conspirators in larger criminal enterprises, answering to even more ruthless and powerful players, where the stakes are very high and they don't mess around when it comes to protecting themselves. Most of the time, with crime at this level, those involved are committing other types of crime as well, especially drug and human trafficking. Could this explain why the FBI got involved so quickly? Could this explain the reason the local police and authorities have not been forthcoming with the public? Could JP have been so overconfident in the abilities he had perfected all of his life, from stealing from Solid Rock, to think it was time to up his game? Could he have become a minnow in the big sea of organized crime? Could Mica have figured this out and want no part of it? Could her divorcing JP have led to a closer look into their finances, which would uncover his financial transgressions? This is a lesson that JP took from his first divorce, as well as his parents' divorce. Divorces lead to information being made public record. Could Mica's sense of values and morality led to her reporting this behavior at a federal level that would expose not only him, but also those in his inner circle? Could Mica have lost her life as a result of JP's greed and struggle for power? Could this explain why JP has not already been arrested for the crimes he openly admitted to? There are so many more questions to ask. We believe when you factor in other activity happening in the country at that time, we will expose unspeakable criminal activity that they may have been part of, or at least adjacent to. We are talking about heinous crimes, and that will help us understand just what a hero Mica was. However, we should never lose sight that the life of an innocent woman is the true tragedy. Mica was a daughter, a sister, a friend. We sincerely hope that they feel like the online attention this case has garnered is in good faith seeking justice. Please join us as we analyze the case and bring attention to South Carolina's legal system's inadequacies in both the financial sector as well as the protection of women from systemic abuse. Hopefully, this tragic loss of life can bring awareness and change and save lives in the future.